Assalamu alaikum, good evening, and welcome to tonight's episode of Talking Points. I'm your host, Syed Neaz Ahmad. In our studios today, we have a gentleman who has been here before. He's a very kind person that he gives us time and we discuss things with him in detail. He is none other than Mr. Syed Badrul Ahsan, editor of Asian Age Dhaka. He's a historian, author, columnist, and, as I said, editor. There are a lot of things on our plate today. You know that it's now nearly 50 years that man landed on the moon. We are still trying to manage our affairs on Earth. It also coincides with Mandela, the anniversary of Tajuddin, and the both anniversaries, 18th and 27th of July, isn't it? We also have on our plate Hussain Muhammad Shah, the deceased president. May Allah bless him. Mr. Shah's legacy, Global Conference on Media Freedom. That is something which is very close to our heart as journalists. And we're also going to talk about racism and floods in Bangladesh. Of course, they're not related, but different topics. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure being here.
Too many things we have, but I do not know how much of it we'll be able to cover, but definitely. Let's say first thing first, 50th anniversary of moon landing. When it was, whether it was an achievement, a lot of people doubt whether man did land on moon, but we're not going into that. This achievement, has it really helped us? We are still looking for places where man can go and live. As one of the scientists told me that we'll have to find a space in the space for future generations, see, because there'll be too many people on Earth. We will have in some time in future used up all the resources, even underwater resources. So we are still looking for somewhere to live happily, but we are not living happily on Earth. What are your impressions? Do you think that really man did land on moon? I mean, I know it's
No, of course, yes. I do believe that this achievement did indeed take place.
Did we have this technology then?
Yes, definitely. And as I was in my school days, I'm sure you were at the same stage. So I still remember clearly the day when these two men, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin, they stepped on the surface of the moon. I was glued to the radio all night and all day. And by the time they landed on the moon, I was in Quetta in school. It was already the 21st of July, but according to the American calendar, they landed on the moon on the 20th of July. So it was a moment of great thrill and a sign of man's innovation, man's genius. So well, I had followed, I'd been following the space program since 1962. I say 1962 because at that point my father gave me a magazine called Panorama, which was brought out by the USIS at that time, United States Information Service. And that had a cover story on John Glenn. So from that time on, I had been interested in the space program. I followed the Apollo 8 mission to the moon, not exactly the moon, they rounded the moon. And I still remember the beautiful words that the Apollo 8 commander, Frank Borman, said on appearing from behind the dark side of the moon. He quoted from the Bible, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth," so on and so forth. But the point is that referring to a question, see, these 50 years have gone by. Ironically, the landing on the moon, this mission to the moon, that was a human achievement, an American achievement, of course, but more than that, it was a human achievement. And in these 50 years, our outlook, the global outlook of people everywhere should have been different. But then that hasn't happened. Wars still rage, famines still happen, people still die, and again, see, we are still in this day and age. We have to answer questions on racism, questions which are raised among quarters who should be giving us leadership. So that's the irony. We are man is thinking of going to Mars and say looking for space there. One day, of course, people will go to Mars, because if we have been able to go to the moon, we will be able to go to Mars, to other planets, but that will take years and years.
True.
But then the problem is, say, there are too many problems on that. We keep looking at the moon. We talk about the achievement of the moon, which definitely was an achievement. But then here on Earth, we've got to achieve some very basic, essential things which we need in life everywhere.
True. Man's first message when they landed on moon was, "We come in peace for all mankind."
Yeah.
And that's a very subtle, very poignant point. See, but we haven't achieved total peace on Earth, as we were talking about. See, we'll come back to space and moon and all that, see, in the romantic sense as well as the scientific sense. See, Mr. Mandela, Madiba.
Yes, Madiba, right.
He was a great man, came from a great family.
Yes.
He could have avoided all the trouble that he underwent and enjoyed a good, happy, comfortable life. You see. But he took up, he was a socialist, a lot of people say, to many people he was a terrorist, but he underwent a lot of trouble, suffered a lot, and probably spent 27 years in prison.
Yes.
What was his legacy?
I think, for me, Nelson Mandela happens to be the last statesman of our generation. Because you see, before him, there were others, but after him, we don't have a man of his caliber. Here was a man who went to prison in 1962, and in 1964 he was sentenced to life imprisonment. He stayed in jail for 27 years. During all this time, he did not know what changes were taking place in the world around him, in the world outside that South African prison, that apartheid prison. And I recall the fact that in 1964, he'd been in jail for 2 years already. In 1964, his wife sent him a letter, which was of course censored and all that.
Yeah.
So, but he did get the information. He was given the information that in Britain, the Labour Party under Harold Wilson had come to power. That letter did not reach him. It was given to him in 1980. By that time, Margaret Thatcher was in power. So you can see the extent of his isolation. But then the main point about, one of the principal points about Mandela is, when he went to prison, he believed in a militant struggle against apartheid. But then those 27 years, which would have embittered any other man, they changed him. He evolved. And when he came out, he came out as a statesman. See, he did not go in for any measures that would be seen as a revenge against the white minority government, the white minority that had been ruling the country. And it is rightly said that he formed a rainbow coalition. So the South African rugby team, if you remember, there was a lot of question when Mandela became president in 1994, whether the rugby team should be there or whether these South African, black Africans should be there. But then he kept it the way it had been. So that showed his magnanimity. This kind of magnanimity you can only get from leaders who are ready and willing and who do indeed become statesmen. So Mandela was that kind of figure, and a figure who should be emulated, who can be emulated in these times when we see a decline of leadership in so many other areas, so many mediocre people becoming leaders of so many different countries, including in the West. So he's in death. He died in 2013, but then he remains a very, very robust example of what statesmanship is all about.
27 years of solitary confinement. See, how did he change himself? I mean, he went in, he was full of enthusiasm, he was full of, whether it was revenge or not, but definitely a cry for change. against racism,
Yes.
against apartheid. See. But solitary confinement, how did he really, through the power of introspection, through what? Because he was not seen by anybody, no information got to him.
I think great men have the capacity, have the quality in themselves. In our region, I'm talking of South Asia, or which is today Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India. We have had Gandhi. He went to jail, spent so many years in jail. But then when he finally emerged free and India became independent, he was a statesman, and he was ready to make peace with the rest of the world. He came to Britain. People like Winston Churchill, sort of denigrated him as a half-naked fakir. But then he was always above these things. Jawaharlal Nehru, he could have been a bitter man. Say, he could have gone the way of Subhash Chandra Bose. Subhash Chandra Bose was different, of course. He went off on another track. Then our very own Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, he spent altogether 13 years in Pakistani prison. But even when he came out, he was not bitter. He was all for friendship. See, of course, on the basis of justice. So all these people, these great people, they have the capacity there. So going back to Mandela, I think it was remarkable, because people thought that first of all, people thought that Mandela would never come out of prison. But then he did. And then the apartheid regime in South Africa, they realized that the future of South Africa would not be a good future, a bright future for the country was not possible without him. And when he came out, he reciprocated. He realized the need. He saw that in South Africa, it would not do, say, to overturn the entire system overnight. He really believed in gradualism. He went to prison as a revolutionary. He came out of prison as a person who believed in an evolution of society.
Yes, as a reformer.
As a reformer. And it was not only him, he had also primed his own associates who were there in jail with him. He also gave them the same lesson. So the people who succeeded him in the presidency, they were certainly not up to his mark as a statesman, but then they have maintained his policy. Even the present president, Cyril Ramaphosa, before him, Jacob Zuma, who is now on trial for corruption, and Thabo Mbeki, they did follow his policy of non-violence. So these people, statesmanship is a quality which should come from within. Say, not many politicians. Most of these figures, national figures that we know in our lives, they stay confined to being politicians. Very few of them can become statesmen.
True. The world, the kind of response that the world provided, in all the capitals of the world, you must have seen it here at Trafalgar Square in front of South Africa House.
Yes.
There was protests, 24 hours, 24/7.
Yes.
Even in winters. I remember having driven near Trafalgar Square, and seeing young people protesting at night. They had some fire, burning fires, in a drum, and they were there, The whole world united to support him. Was it a different world? Is this a different world now, that we don't support people who are suffering?
I think we have fallen into this vortex, which I call crass commercialism, and the age of great leadership, the times of great leadership is somehow behind us. And when you refer to those young people, staging demonstrations before the South Africa House, I recall at least one particular young man, Chris Hayne,
Peter Hayne.
Peter Hayne, so who was there as a young activist. He later became a minister in the British government.
Tariq Ali.
And of course, Tariq Ali is a legend by himself. So these people were there. Nowadays, I think things have changed in such a dramatic way that you don't have leaders who do not have the ability or do not have the opportunity to fight for those great causes. And again, there are people who are more interested in their own particular party politics or national politics to be able to go out on the world stage. For example, we have in the past if you go back to the United States, think of what's happening in the United States today. But this is not the United States we know.
True.
And
okay,
in Britain, we
need to take a break.
Yes, sure.
And when we come back, we'll definitely cross over the Atlantic. Thank you for being with us. Don't go away. We'll be back after this very short break.